There are some real similarities between rendering an audio file and simply saving an audio file. So let's talk about the differences. When you save an audio file, it's going to save over the original file. So if you did any editing to the audio file and clicked on Save by typing Control or Command S, it's going to save over the original. However, you can also click Shift S to save it as a new name, and we've already talked about that. But the difference with rendering is that typically when you're rendering, you're adding an effect through the master section over here. And we'll talk about the master section a little bit more later. However, let's talk about rendering an audio file and how it's different. So if I go under the render window right here, I've got some options that I can choose when I perform my rendering. So I can choose what the source of the render actually is. In this case, I'm going to have it select the whole file. So the entire file is going to be rendered. Or I could choose a selected audio range or a specific region, but I can also choose whether I want to render it in place on top of the original file, or create a brand new unnamed file, or create a brand new named file. So what I'm going to do is click on In Place for my render, then go back to Render here, and I'm going to add quickly in the master section here an effect, a mastering effect. So I'm going to right or control click on this first slot and go to the mastering category down here next to Steinberg and call up the master rig. And just as an example, I'm going to go up here and go to the factory preset of pop rock. So now I have one process inside of the master rig. But if I wanted that master rig plugin to actually be part of this audio file, I would need to render it. Because if I just saved the file right now, it's just going to save the original file. It's not going to save the file with the processing that I have over here in the master section. To do that, I have to render the file. So I'm going to go to the render window right here. It's going to render the whole file in place. So when I hit start, it's going to apply that processing to the audio file. You'll see a progress window down here. You can also monitor your progress up here in the tasks window. I'll show you that a little bit more in a moment. But now here is the rendered file. If I hit undo, you can see that there's now been a difference or a process applied to this audio file. So I'm going to hit redo, which is Control or Command Y to get to the newly processed file. And now I could either save over the original or save it as a new version. But let's look at some of the other options for render. So I'm going to undo the rendering. So now we have the original file again with one plugin in the master section. If I come back here to render, let's say I wanted to give it a named file to save it on my hard drive. Then I can come over here and give it a name like C. So this will be the C version in this location as the WAV default format. And then I could choose to exclude the master section from the rendering, but I'm going to leave it on so that that rendering gets applied to the new file. Then I'm going to hit the Start button. And now in the Tasks window up here, you'll see how long it's going to take for that process to complete. But then when it is complete, it's going to load that newly processed version as a new file into your file group. So here's the R04C version, and this version has the processing applied to the file. So the Render tab here in the ribbon is a quick way to get to your rendering options. However, you should also be aware that there's a Render button at the very bottom of the Master section. And when you click on that, it reveals the entire export window, which is normally in the File menu. So here's the export settings, and you can see that you've got even more options when you're rendering inside of this window. So that's how to render an audio file through the master section. And now in our next section, let's talk about audio montage basics.